Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 28. Translation. Thus situated in the highest transcendental stage, the mind ceases from all material reaction and becomes situated in its own glory, transcendental to all material conceptions of happiness and distress. At that time, the yogi realizes the truth of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He discovers that pleasure and pain, as well as their interactions, which he attributed to his own self, are actually due to the false ego, which is a product of ignorance. Purport. Forgetfulness of one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a product of ignorance. By yoga practice, one can eradicate this ignorance of thinking oneself independent of the Supreme Lord. One's actual relationship is eternally that of love. The living entity is meant to render transcendental loving service to the Lord. Forgetfulness of that sweet relationship is called ignorance, and in ignorance one is impelled by the three material modes of nature to think himself the enjoyer. When the devotee's mind is purified, and he understands that his mind has to be dovetailed with the desires of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has attained the perfectional transcendental stage, which is beyond the perception of material happiness and distress. As long as one acts on his own account, he is subject to all the material perceptions of so-called happiness and distress. Actually, there is no happiness, just as there is no happiness in any of the activities of a madman. So in material activities, the mental concoctions of happiness and distress are false. Actually, everything is distress. When the mind is dovetailed to act according to the desire of the Lord, one has attained the transcendental stage. The desire to lord it over material nature is the cause of ignorance. And when that desire is completely extinguished, and the desires are dovetailed with those of the Supreme Lord, one has reached the perfectional stage. Upalabdha paratma kashta. Upalabdha means realization. Realization necessarily indicates individuality. In the perfectional liberated stage, there is actual realization. Nivritya means that the living entity keeps his individuality. Oneness means that he realizes happiness in the happiness of the Supreme Lord. In the Supreme Lord there is nothing but happiness. Anandamaya Vyasat. The Lord is by nature full of transcendental happiness. In the liberated stage, oneness with the Supreme Lord means that one has no realization other than happiness. But the individual still exists, otherwise this word upalabdha, indicating individual realization of transcendental happiness, would not have been used. Syopyetaya charamaya manaso nivritchatasmin mahimni avasita sukha dukkha bhaya hetutvam api asati kartari dukayo yat svatman vidatta upalabdha paratma kashta. Thus situated in the highest transcendental stage, the mind ceases from all material reaction and becomes situated in its own glory, transcendental to all material conceptions of happiness and distress. At that time, the yogi realizes the truth of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He discovers that pleasure and pain, as well as their interactions, which he attributed to his own self, are actually due to the false ego, which is a product of ignorance. In the material conditioned stage of life, we are thinking of this body as the self. We are thinking of the actions that take place within this body as our own actions. We are considering the pleasure and pain which is situated within this body as our pleasure and pain. And in this way, we are bewildered by the material energy which steals away our intelligence. The false ego is responsible for this activity. The false ego makes us think that we are this body, and the false ego causes us to continue to act within the material conception of life. To break free from this conception that I am this body, that the happiness and distress of this body are mine, that the actions or interactions that are taking place with other living entities are due to me, that the actions or reactions which are caused by me. When one finally understands that this is all false, this is not me, these are not my actions, all these things are being done by nature. The nature has caused this body to act in its particular fashion. Everybody has his own nature. And all the qualities of this material world are born of our own nature. That which is here of this body. All the qualities of this material life, I should have said, are a product of the nature. Somebody has some likes and some dislikes, some qualification, some disqualification. This is born of the body, which is born of nature. This body is a product of nature, and the qualities of this body are a product of nature. We cannot proclaim these qualities or even this body to be us or ours. Nirmama, nirahankara. It is all going on under the pushing of nature. We were explaining last night. Forced. Everybody's forced in this material world. We're forced to accept bodies. We're forced to accept the troubles which come in the material mind. Force. It is not that we want to take them upon ourselves. When one understands that he's forced and that all this happiness and distress is placed upon him, then he begins to understand something about the fact that he is not the body, the fact that he is not the mind, the fact that he is something beyond these things. Yeah. Then, when he realizes that pleasure and pain are nothing but the reactions of the material nature, then he realizes they're due to the false ego, and he no longer is disturbed by any happiness or distress, pleasures or pains, good or bad, up or down. No more duality can touch him. He is simply situated on a steady platform. We have in the past spoken a lot about steadiness in devotional service. Steadiness is a glorified quality because when one gets steady, he's situated in the platform where he is no longer bound by the duality of this world. Steadiness means steadiness in happiness, steadiness in distress, steadiness in cold, steadiness in heat, steadiness in pleasure, steadiness in pain. He just performs his service without any without any consideration. Yeah. It's not funny, it's wonderful. Without any consideration, he performs his service steadily, without any fall down. Yeah. This is also described in the Bhagavad Gita. Mamachayo vyabacharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatichaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Mamchayo vyabacharini bhakti. One performs his service steadily. Not that if somebody comes up to us and says something, that causes the mind to kick off a whole fireworks display, and we're no longer able to function. Steadiness. Vyabhicharini bhakti. No longer can one be deviated from his particular duty. If the body says no more, then he will go on. If the mind says no more, he will still go on. If everybody else says no more, he will still go on. Just serving Krishna without any fall down. What does fall down mean? It means that you give up serving Krishna. Yeah. Then, sagunan samati chaitan. One comes to the platform of transcending all material qualities and being situated in the spiritual quality. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. He attains the stage of Brahman. Not the liberated, impersonal stage, but the liberated stage beyond all material qualities, where one's qualities are born of the spiritual energy themselves. And so, we find, spiritual energy itself, we find that the coming to that platform of steadiness means that one comes to the platform of Brahman. If you just serve Krishna all the time and don't stop, that means you have reached the platform of Brahman. Because he is just simply fixed, that's all. And nothing can stop that. In the beginning, that also does not mean that one has transcended pleasure and pain. He may feel pain, but he keeps on serving. That's the initial stage of liberation. But after some time, when one has become experienced on this platform of steadiness, then the mind surrenders. Now, I know that sounds almost impossible. I know that sounds like some kind of pie-in-the-sky wishful thinking. But it is a fact that the mind ultimately gives up its rascal desire to lord over the material nature. And it does, certainly it does surrender at one point in time. And at that point, because the mind sees it's got no other way, there's no way out. No matter what it says, no matter what's going on, you still go on with devotional service. So the mind decides to cooperate. And at that time, it becomes situated, as it is stated here, in its own glory. In other words, the mind is actually, in its natural state, in goodness. It just becomes affected by passion or ignorance due to the contaminated conditions of this material world. And when it is freed from that contamination, it will be reestablished in its very nice quality of goodness. It will be reestablished in its proper situation, constitutional position. And at that time, blissfulness develops in the mind. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. That when the mind is purified, evam prasanna manaso, it becomes blissful. The mind becomes very blissful. Blissful mind, peaceful, satisfied, tranquil. When the mind is so blissful and tranquil and peaceful in that way, then what is the problem? No matter what happens in the material world, what is the problem? Everything's okay. The material world can be churning up and down and falling on its head, cracking into a million pieces. But when one has a peaceful mind, this is just to be expected. A devotee knows that the material world is a place of suffering, is a place of misery, is a place where there will be trouble again and again and again. And if one is situated himself properly in spiritual realization, then he knows that there is no need to be disturbed, That is the nature of the material world. The whole material world is falling apart. Still, I must go on with my service to Krishna. There are many places in the world which are not so organized like Sweden. I mean, after all, compared to some countries in South America where they've got 10 million% inflation every month, Sweden is very nicely organized. In a field of no trees, the castor tree looks very big. So we find that there are devotees there, no matter how crazy the material nature gets, they go on serving. Actually, we become attached to thinking everything must be very nice, otherwise we cannot serve. But actually, no. Things can get crazy. Things generally do get crazy. That's the nature of the material world. And even if the material circumstances are all perfect, we tend to make everything crazy in our mind. Because the mind is such a little rascal. Always wants some suffering condition there in order to feel good. But what is that pleasure? That's like the pleasure of the hog eating stool. The mind also takes pleasure. Sometimes it takes pleasure in great disturbing condition. Sometimes the mind takes great pleasure in all kinds of seeing troubles in others, criticizing others, disturbing others. When one's mind is very low class, then he may even take great pleasure in causing pain to others. There are all kinds of ways in which one may feel some pleasure in the mind. That we are not talking about here. When we talk about the transcendental pleasure, we're not talking about the pleasure one receives in the lower modes of material nature. We're talking about the pleasure one receives in the mode of goodness. The pleasure of knowledge. The pleasure of blissfulness, which arises from that platform of goodness. Evam prasana manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha. When the mind is so situated blissfully, then bhagavad tattva vijnanam, he gets realization of the Supreme through the process of devotional service. That is also in the Brahma Bhuta verse in Bhagavad Gita. Mad bhaktim labhate param. Then you gradually attain the platform of bhakti. You engage yourself in bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is actually meant for those who have come to the liberated platform. Now bhakti yoga is so nice and liberal that even you're not liberated, even you are in a condition of contamination, still you will be able to advance gradually, little by the mercy and potency of this process. But factually, the bhakti process is meant for the liberated souls, already liberated, to engage in their eternal service with the Supreme. Even Bhagavatam, Dharma projita kaitavocha paramo nirmatsaranam satam. It is meant for the already liberated Paramahamsa class of man who is freed from all enviousness in his heart. Freed from any enviousness of any other personality. Satam, great soul. So, we find Bhagavatam is meant for the topmost class. Bhakti is meant for the topmost class. Those who are freed from the bodily conception of life. And yet still, Krishna is so merciful that he allows us who are in a very fallen state to go on serving him. And he accepts that service. He is not contaminated if we perform service to him in a contaminated state. We become purified because he's shuddham apapavidam. He's freed from all possibilities of being contaminated. But we are filled with possibilities to be contaminated. Since we are extremely contaminated, and if any contaminated condition comes by, we immediately grasp it and become again contaminated, even if we were somewhat purified. Therefore, steadiness in service and to come to the platform of actually being freed from the contaminated condition means that one has to work at it. It's a trouble. It's like when the mind starts telling you all kinds of garbage, like within the next 2 hours, when the mind starts telling you all nasty things, then you have to work at it. You have to preach to your mind. You have to say, my dear sir, all this nonsense you are giving me is simply nonsense. Why don't you engage yourself in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra? That's why we say minimum 16 rounds. It's not that when you finish 16 rounds, that's it. And the rest of the day, you're engaged in all kinds of other things. Maybe the mind goes berserk, but no more rounds. We already chanted. We have to wait till tomorrow. One can go on chanting 16, 32, 48, 64, 96, whatever you like. You can go on chanting. This will calm the very agitated mind. If your mind is completely berserk, if you just go on chanting Hare Krishna and just keep chanting. If your mind is completely berserk and you just go on chanting, just keep chanting, just keep chanting, just keep chanting, it will calm down and it will become very satisfying just by the chanting. Try it someday. When one is in a very, very disturbed condition, because it happens sometimes, not all the time, rarely, but it happens, that the material nature creates circumstances which are so intolerable, it's like, help! At that time, understand, the help is already there. The beadbag. Chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's already there. Help, all assistance. The holy name of Krishna and Krishna himself are not different. When one realizes this, he may enter onto the Madhyamadikari platform. Just by understanding this point. To understand this point means that one is caught on to what this process is all about. It's all about associating with Krishna. That we can actually associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We are associating with the Lord now. We are sitting before Him, listening to His philosophy, and hearing His holy name. So we are associating with Him. And He is associating with us, purifying us by His presence. So, in this way we can understand the essence of the process is to associate with Krishna. Because He is the one who will purify us. The whole essence of this process is to associate with Krishna. Somehow come in contact with Krishna. Therefore, we are continually bringing Krishna into the picture. Talk about Krishna, speak about, chant the name of Krishna, serve Krishna. Everything for Krishna. This is our whole Krishna consciousness movement. Then, when all such activities are devoted in the Supreme, His mind, His faith, His refuge are all situated in the Supreme, always thinking of Krishna, manmana, always being Krishna's devotee, bhavamad bhakto, worshipping Him, majjaji, and offering obeisance to Him, mam namaskaru. And everything we are eating, everything we are doing, all offerings we are making, all austerities we are performing, we are offering it to Krishna. Then we become purified. Then we become freed from the raga, bhaya, krodha, manmaya, mamupasha. By becoming convinced and taking shelter in Krishna, we become freed from the attachments, fears, or angers of this material world. Everybody's filled with attachments. Things that he wants it done like that, not like that. He wants things this way, not this way. He wants to enjoy in that fashion. And then he's full of fear. Oh, something shall come to disturb this, or oh, something else will come and disturb me, or some pain will come, and oh, I'll lose my money, or I'll lose my position, I will lose bhaya. And krodha, how can you do this? Stop this! Beating, screaming, wrath comes, destroying everything, ruining everything, as in war. You can see attachment, fear, and anger brings war. So, being freed from this, bhavo jnana tapasa, through the processes of knowledge, through the process of austerity, putam, one becomes purified. Purification takes place on the Brahmabhuta platform. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatpartvena nirmalam. One becomes freed from all of the unwanted things by the process of bhakti. This is also stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that by nityam bhagavata sevaya, always engaging in hearing Bhagavatam, always engaging in serving the spiritual master, nityam, always, every day. Nityam means every day, or always. In Bhagavati Uttama Shloke, Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Devotional service becomes fixed within the heart as an irrevocable fact. A fact which cannot be changed under any circumstances. In other words, this devotional process becomes fixed as our life. And there is nothing else but that. There's only Krishna, nothing but Krishna. Not that later on one will take shelter in the material nature and think this is the perfection of... No. There is no shelter in this world. It's all durashaya, false shelter. Nothing and no one can protect you outside of Krishna. Durashaya, je bahiratamanina. It's because it's all of the external energy. And the external energy of the Lord, you cannot get shelter. There is none. What will shelter us? Will we be sheltered by the government? No. They cannot stop the miserable conditions of the material world. No government, no agency, no person. Nobody can stop old age, disease, or death. Even the big doctors can make all kinds of hospitals and research institutions. They may solve one kind of disease, but another kind will come. Yeah. Nobody heard of AIDS just a few years ago. Nobody knew what it was. Now everybody's talking about it. Expanding like anything. Nobody knew. They thought the only problem we have is heart disease and cancer. So now billions and billions of dollars go into that disease. And then another disease showed up. Said, here I am. Yeah. And even if they conquer this disease, another one will come and say, oh, you forgot about me. There are many examples of diseases just going everywhere and nobody's able to figure it out. How disease is traveling so nicely throughout the whole world, from one place to another. Let someone try and protect you. That's all right. It's a money-making business. But who will actually prevent disease? Who will prevent old age? Who will prevent death? Who will prevent the pain you get when somebody looks at you in an improper fashion? You can have piles of research organizations, but when somebody looks at you and thinks that you're the biggest pile of stool in the creation, who can prevent the pain in your mind as one starts to flip out completely? Oh, what? No. What pills are there to take to prevent that? What aerobic activity will prevent that? Which computer program will prevent that? And what to speak of the general all-around suffering condition that one is born with in his mind? Nobody going to protect us. They're even finding out more and more. Now they're openly challenging psychiatry in the science magazines. They even have cover stories with questions like, does it have any value? So people of course, at one point will get very frustrated when they find out that everything they're doing is simply good for wasting money, but it does not help anybody. At that point, then we'll have a very receptive audience for Krishna consciousness. When they understand, actually, whatever they're doing is just a waste of time. You can make all kinds of arrangements up and down and left and right, and it's simply a waste of time. And it's really good for economic development. You work hard, then waste your money on all these things. Other people, they're all just busy cheating you. Cheaters and cheated. Somebody sits there as patient, somebody sits there as doctor. Yet both are sick. Except there's one patient, in the psychiatry business especially, as we were talking. One patient, he pays the other patient. That shows you he's crazy. So in this material world, we find that it is all one big madhouse. And the only sane persons are those who know they're not the body. They know they're not the mind. They know they're Krishna's servant. Then you are sane. Any other condition is insanity, because it's not true. Those who know that they are Krishna's eternal servant, they are sane. Everybody else is insane. They always get insulted when you say like that. Because they think, who are these people to talk? They're also insane. Look at the way they dress. But that is not the only consideration of sanity or insanity. Although I would suppose if this dress had nothing to do with spiritual life, yes, certainly that would be a little crazy to wear like this. But since it is part and parcel of the culture of spiritual life, no, there's nothing wrong. What is sanity? What is insanity? When you don't know who you are, can you possibly be called sane? When you think you're something you're not, can you possibly be called sane? Not by anybody's definition. Therefore, simply because nobody knows he's not the body, then they're all insane. Everybody thinks he is the body, so he's thinking he is what he is not, therefore he is insane. This is also a straight definition from the psychiatric books. Thinking that you are something you are not. Schizophrenia. That's all. So therefore, everybody is schizophrenic in this world. Because they all think there's something they're not. It's just that if you think you're someone who is actually someone else, then they know you're crazy. But if you think you're someone who's nobody else, then they think you're sane. That's the only thing. If you think you're Napoleon, then they know you're crazy. Then they put you in the nut house. But if you think you're Joe somebody, then they think, well, that's right, nobody else is this, so he must be sane. But he's not that either. He's still insane. And who knows these things? Only devotees. Therefore, who is crazy? The one who does not understand his relationship with Krishna, he is crazy. Therefore, we are acting like doctors to bring the fallen conditioned souls to the point of sanity by helping them to understand who they are and what they are. That's the first step. Understanding the truth of one's situation is the first step. Then the second step is the rehabilitative therapy, whereby we get the conditioned souls to understand that they've got to act according to this new identity. So we have to give them exact kind of therapy in doses that they can take to engage them in their proper service, so gradually they become accustomed to this proper form of action. And after some time, they are released from the madhouse of the material world and allowed to enter into their natural circumstances of the Krishna consciousness movement. The Krishna consciousness movement is for those who have been released from the insane asylum of the material world. Now one may think, well, that sounds a little bit puffed up after all. in the Krishna consciousness movement, you're only a handful of people, and the whole world is a huge mass of people. Therefore, because of the laws of democracy, because there are more madmen, in your opinion, than there are sane men, then actually you are the madmen and they are the sane men. All right, let's accept your definition. However, you're still wrong, because there are many more in the spiritual world than there are in the material world. We are just the ambulance which has entered into the material world from the spiritual world. Therefore, there are far more of us than you. Therefore, you are still crazy. And we can, when you become qualified and free yourself from the insane condition, then we will put you in this ambulance and take you back to your original abode. You'll be very happy there. So, we are struggling against the whole material nature, because the material nature is full of people who don't know who they are, don't know what is the supreme, don't know what is service to the Lord. And we are trying very hard, sometimes more successfully, sometimes less successfully, to bring the conditioned soul out of the status of suffering condition of life and putting him in the status of being situated in purified goodness. It is also very satisfying for us to do like that, but sometimes there'll be some troubles coming from the material energy. So we should, in all cases, surrender to the Supreme. It's like when you contact the material nature, because we are not Shuddham Apapavidam, pure and uncontaminable, at this stage anyway, we may sometimes become distressed, being touched by the material energy. Therefore, to counteract this disturbing condition, we should always be engaged in hearing and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And thus, even if there is some contamination from the material nature, we can gradually overcome it and situate ourselves in proper spiritual status of life. Go back home, back to Godhead, and be extremely happy in mind, happy in heart. All that. Hare Krishna.